I'm James Marshall here today at Red Quill Media, and joining me is Darren Gaub, the Lewis and Clark County Central Committee Chairman for the GOP. Darren, how are you today?
Doing well. Thrilled to be here and talk to you and whoever's listening about, I guess what you and I just witnessed over the weekend in, of all places, Missoula.
Right? What a place to hold a GOP platform convention.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been to, I think, 6 state conventions now with the GOP, and they rotate around Missoula and here in Helena and Billings. And it's always funny to go to Missoula because you just never know what's going to happen there. And say, who's going to come protest us? Who's going to come walking through the halls? You're just like, we're out here doing the work of conservative, limited government, what government's supposed to be in the heart of, as it was called at the convention, the Kremlin on the Clark Fork. Yeah, that's okay. Good people in Missoula, too, though, by the way. There's a lot of good folks up there. It's always fun.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to, chat a little bit with the Missoula Central Committee Chairman, and he was really a nice guy to chat with. But I told him I wouldn't want his position for nothing.
Right.
But
it is at times unforgiving, especially for someone like him who's really young. And great on him, by the way, because the GOP needs to get younger, grab that energy there, help them make their own future. And I think it's wonderful when people like him get involved in the Missoula GOP. Katie Fruits, runs for office here as a recent high school graduate. I mean, people will say she's young. Yeah, she's young, but you are way beyond her years. By the way, some of our best legislators, currently serving legislators, are in their early to mid 20s. So the example set. These people are great.
Yeah, and we've seen what Warden Finley did in his campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, he really took action and got right after it. He knows what he wants. He knows what he's going after as far as conservative values. And I think we need to see more of that from the next generation coming into this.
We do, and I think it's these people that are doing that are consistent with my personal philosophy of things when it comes to true Republicans, true conservatives, as we're supposed to be, which is you're not supposed to try to play this game where you slide up next to the Democrat and try to hide a little bit and make it difficult to tell the difference between the two. Most people aren't really looking for that. They want to know the actual difference. And so when Finley Warden runs against his opponent in a primary, there's a massive difference between the two, and he made it clear that's the case, and he walked away with the election handily. And there's places where that's not going to work as well, but it doesn't mean you should change. Show a stark contrast and give people a real choice.
Welcome to Common Sense and Consequences, where we sit down with Montanans from every walk of life to talk honestly about what's happening in our communities, at our capital, and in our daily lives.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the big talking points, or one of the big key points, at the convention, was getting the Republican Party to stand tall in its conservative values and have a clear distinction between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, and get away from this, giant gray pool in between them.
Right. No.
That's what it seems like. You got the black, you got the white, and then there's this big pool of gray in the middle.
Right.
And, yesterday, my wife and I were out knocking doors for Katie Fruits in her campaign effort. And that's one of the big things we're coming across with voters, is that voters, are tired of how big the middle is.
Right.
They want a much clearer distinction between the parties and the representatives that are, currently working in them.
I think they're also tired of these mass-produced mailers showing up with their boxes. And I know what I do with them. I don't even read them. I just throw them away because well, it's easy to know that my mind's made up because I know all the people running anyways. But for the most part, people either go one of two directions. They throw them away, don't read them. Or two, they read them and just get angry at all the negativity. And I don't blame them, because the mailers really, for the most part, don't say anything of substance. They'll take things out of context or whatever and create this thing and then mass mail it out. And people are like, okay, whatever, this is politics, and throw it away. What matters? Well, what matters is Katie Fruits and the people who demonstrate the support for her showing up on your doorstep and giving you 30 seconds if that's all you have time for, or giving you more time if you need it, and explaining things. Saying, hey, I want to represent you and your concerns. I'm a representative. That's how that's supposed to work. And then letting them know who they are and a philosophy towards life. And knocking doors wins races at the local level, the legislature, Senate or House. Mailers really don't. You can lose them that way, but you can't win them that way.
Well, and I think we saw that in the primary for Senate District 42, mm-hmm. where the Republicans had 3 candidates in there, and by and large, I know that the one that won that primary, not only were there the mailers there, but he was out knocking doors. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was out there trying to make a connection with the voters and give them an opportunity to meet him, get to know his values, and ask him questions. And I think that's really what won the election for him.
Oh, I agree 100%. And I think Lewis and Clark County as a whole can stand there and say that the kind of folks that we have running for offices here show that difference in philosophy very clearly. And then they do the work. They're going to go out there and walk and knock on doors. People will join them and help them. Because to see the difference between the Senate District 42 candidates now and Democrat Republican is very, very clearly different. And people want to see that. Mm-hmm. But that's true for most every district in the county, where our candidates are a clear difference from their opponent. Does that mean they're going to win? Not necessarily. It's Helena, after all. It's a very blue and very distinct areas. But you have to compete it. I think a lot of people don't vote because they don't see the difference. I send a Republican, I send a Democrat, and guess what? They both come back and basically fleece the taxpayers for programs they say they need. We can show them a difference. It's not like we're going to win everything now either, and I think that's part of it too. Is you can't go into an election cycle and keep saying it's the most important election in American history, and then come out of that and win or lose and say that everything's good from here on into the future, or, oh, that was horrible, we're toast.
Well, I think that's what we saw at the convention, and that was talked about too, mm-hmm. was that as far as the more hardline conservatives, we saw in the primary that the GOP picked up some really good candidates, but we also saw that, we still lost a little ground too. So like you said, it's hard to come into these things, stating that, this is the most important election. And I'm not saying we came out of the primary a stalemate. I do think that, as far as putting a team together, I think we came out of the primary better than we did going into it, but to think that, we went in there and just kept hitting home run after home run, you and I both know it takes a while to change course, and
it does.
And keep us going in the right direction.
Well, and I think sports is a great analogy, whether it be football, baseball, or like you and I do a lot, go to the gym.
Right.
Progress isn't measured in instantaneous results. I mean, you're not going to go in there one day not having lifted a weight and go from benching 135 10 times to a week later benching 315 10 times. Yeah. Politics can be the same way. It's
applied pressure over time.
Stay at it. Keep telling the truth, keep being unapologetic, and keep moving forward and say, oh, you know what? Let's just say there's 10 races that are critical and we pick up 5 and they retain 5. That's moving forward. You're not going backwards. Football's the same way. It's often called a game of inches, right? Not everything's a 40-yard completion.
Exactly. And I mean, and it also boils down to the individual though, too. Mm-hmm. Like, the 5 individuals you might have picked up might have a little more, intestinal fortitude than the other 5.
Right.
So they're going to stand their ground a little more, have a little more conviction. So, you might have a little trade out there, but it also depends on the, the quality of the legislator. And I think we've, made it through the primaries with some really great candidates, for the voters. I'm excited here in the Helena area, who we've got coming up. So,
and not only am I the chairman of the GOP in this county, but as you know, I'm the state director for the Freedom Caucus. So I take a look at this statewide too, and get a lot of input from a lot of different people. And that message is the same across the state. It resonates. You're going to lose some. Some people are very good liars and convince voters that they're still the right guy. But over time, they'll be exposed, and you can't control all that. But a lot of things, there's a lot of messages that have been heard, and let's take a look at the convention. I'm on the rules subcommittee for the state GOP now, one of 10 members. And we knew that our bylaws and rules, our operating methods are, inside the team, had a lot of gaps in them, and things we lacked accountability and various things. And so we spent months working on those, going through the legal side, going through the parliamentarian just to make sure processes are right. And just what do we really truly want to get to where we can get to a point of accountability? And we walked in there going, okay, we think this is going to pass. You can't guarantee it. It was a very conservative bylaws submission and a very conservative platform submission. And the bylaws passed by 97% on the vote. And the platform passed pretty much unanimously. That's the grassroots. That's the grassroots speaking and saying, you know what, we're tired of people pretending. And we want accountability. And anybody who runs from accountability probably shouldn't be in politics. And anybody who runs towards it should. Anybody, people who ask for it. That's a convention. That's one. Call that a base hit.
Yeah, when I was sitting in there, and of course I was just sitting in there as a non-delegate, even, obviously I ran in this last primary, but trying to stay informed on everything. I wanted to be there and at least, witness it for myself. And when they started to go into the bylaws and the changes that they were going to make, I was really excited to hear that, that they were really going to, fine tune things and bring it in so that, the voters can start to have more confidence, in who's coming up on the ticket and who who their options are.
Right.
And hopefully without allowing so much outside I'm not going to say interference, but just outside influence. That was the big thing in this past election was, I think voters were having a hard time distinguishing, between, Americans for Prosperity, conservatives for Montana, because a lot of these voters, they're working all the time. They don't have the time to sit around and research all of these things, and so a lot of times, something can come across, and say conservatives for Montana, and without even thinking, that sounds like a great thing, but then you find out that, well, they're not as conservative as their title says. And
not even close.
Not even close. And so, a change in these bylaws, I think is going to help us, be able to identify, a little faster, who really stands for what.
Yeah.
And are they, going to represent, the people the way they say they are. So,
and of note is most of the kind of people who we anticipated would probably show up and really fight against all this and want to be part of the work because they would want to subvert it. Not a one of them showed up.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And so, fine. That's a story of itself. There was a video that was presented there off of a Facebook feed from a senator in Bozeman area, a Democrat senator in Bozeman area that showed some things very distinctly. That video has been taken down. These folks think they're going to get out there and do these things like, this kumbaya group hug type of thing, and I'm not saying don't be respectful, don't get along with people, don't treat people civilly. But when you have a completely different philosophy of life and completely different value system in the political arena, when you snuggle up next to each other, you're telling everybody else that there's no gap between you generally in your beliefs. You're just going to grow government. And so I think that's something we have to continue to, like you said, apply pressure. We may not get it this time, but don't stop. And that's one of the things I'm aiming towards within our messaging and marketing, and the things that we're telling people, the truth, is that at the end of a 4-month legislative cycle, you don't quit. You may not do things as frequently, but you still go out there and say, hey, listen, this is what happened. Here's just why it happened. This is the difference between what was being proposed here and what was being proposed there. Property taxes was one of them. You get a little bit back. You could have hit a whole lot more, and it could have been a lot more permanent and long-lasting. But it is what it is. Maybe that was a run up the middle, and we lost 1.5 yards or 2. But there's another play to come, and we can try again.
Yeah, I've been talking to a couple of these legislators that are, hopefully going to make it past the finish line in the general. Mm-hmm. And they've really had a good grasp of what happened with this property tax debacle that took place, and that it goes back to the 2015 issues there where they revamped some things. So I guess at least it's nice that they know where it started and how we can go back and, try to fix it. Unlike, of course, one of the people that was in that video, and we know who was, the architect behind this current disaster. And I'm trying not to mention a whole bunch of names here because, that really doesn't get us anywhere, in the long run, but.
Well, what you're getting at is ultimately we want to be principles based and ideas driven by ideas and solutions, real actual solutions, not just say solutions and then go into the legislature and compromise everything and say we came up with solutions. It's like, actually, no, you just fail a little bit less. Maybe. But by not using names, what we're trying to do is say that there's a principle to follow. And that principle, as you and I said here, is faith first, and then family, and then freedom. And what does it do what does it take to preserve those? Well, let's start by adhering to the Constitution, first and foremost, federal and state. But, we live under a contract. We don't live under the shifting dynamics of personalities. Let's do what it says. Let's protect freedom of speech. Let's protect the right to keep and bear arms and defend our own families. And all of that's written in the Bill of Rights and the Constitutions, state and federal. So therefore, it doesn't matter who you are. What matters is what you stand up for. What are your guiding principles? And if you can do that and stay away from the name-calling part, then you can clearly show our difference because X person didn't live up to the principles. And when I say that, I acknowledge the power of the GOP platform as it's written now. And it supports the Constitution, as it should. Because if it didn't, I wouldn't vote for it. But if there was a difference, the Constitution is the law of the land, and the platform is just a platform. But now we have something that's short enough, I think, that voters can read and understand better than 19 pages of something that wasn't really well done in the first place. Now it's looking a lot better. And it shows that these are the principles by which we say we're going to abide. And if you don't, now you've got the rules of ourselves within the Republican Party to be able to show accountability. And we need to not be afraid to tell people that even within our own party, there are people that are failing, and you, the voter, need to hold them accountable more than anybody else. I think they will.
I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that. Mm-hmm. I know, in my campaign, I had, quite a few voters reaching out to me about various issues. And, I told him, I said, no matter how the primary, works out, to not lose sight of that and to keep pushing, and keep asking for answers, to what their issues were, whether it's these, all these permitted wells or unpermitted wells and the water rights issues, because that was a big one.
Yeah.
And I think the more that the voters put their legislators on speed dial or have their email address at the top of their book, and but like we're saying, be professional. It's not personal. If you want solutions, stick to the issue,
Sure.
and start to bridge that gap between voters and legislators so that we can really start to make change in this state and not have one or the other feel like they're, getting the short end of everything.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's, I think supporting that, what is so incredible right now is, for example, this room we're sitting in. The power of the internet and the power of the alternative media.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the more powerful media in general as it grows. Red Quill Media is a solution to the podcast space in Montana that's saying, hey, listen, we're going to get our message out. We don't have to filter it through Helena Independent Record or KXLF TV or whatever. So this is an incredible platform, and I pray that it grows over time. The platform where I'm editor-in-chief, the Montana Sentinel. I've been called many things. That I have a rag that's all it does is do a hit job. I'm like, no. I have an actual journalism outlet that calls balls and strikes and tells the truth. And if it hits you hard, that's not my problem. I just tell you what happened. And some may like it, some may not. But regardless, it's the truth. So different kinds of outlets here, both on the same mission. And the more of those there are, the more Montanans will hear the truth through the noise. And I think that's great. And it will also grow slowly or however over time.
Yep. Like I said, one of the best ways to stay in touch with what's going on is to get out there and do some door knocking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm all for supporting, the candidates that I've gotten to know. But I really do enjoy knocking on doors. I enjoy talking with people and hearing about their world and what's going on and, what they're struggling with and, things like that. If that voice doesn't make it to the right ears, nothing's ever going to change.
Right.
And so
one heart at a time is sometimes one heart, one mind, at a time is how this works. And that's okay.
I was thinking when you were talking about, how they're shortening up, the length of the platform as far as being written out.
Yeah.
And that always makes me kind of chuckle a little bit because one of my favorite lines that I say even around our house all the time is less is more.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. I'm like, I've always advertised the statement of be brief, be brilliant, and be gone.
Right.
But if you can't be brilliant, at least be brief and be gone.
Right. And that's always been my line. I was like, I just look right. Somebody has some big lengthy something, and I'm like, less is more.
Absolutely.
There's a reason why our Constitution and the Bill of Rights truly are as abbreviated as much as they are. Mm-hmm. We have seen over time, how many different laws can we come out with, that explain what it is when one person trespasses on another? How many thousands?
Right.
Sometimes less is more.
How many State of the Union addresses do you remember? And then how many people remember the opening of the Gettysburg Address?
Right.
Hour and a half long State of the Union address. You know what that said? I have no idea.
I don't know.
But 7 years ago, right? I'm a big believer in the less is more and, to the point. And then don't try to overwhelm the people you're talking to with, the word salad. Just say, what are your issues? What are your questions of me about policy? What's concerning you right now? What's going wrong? What do you think is going right? Let them do the talking. I think I threw, when I ran for office too, by the way, here in downtown Helena. I'm only lost by about 300 votes against the minority leader of the House. And I threw some people off because I went to the door, knocked on it, and said, introduce myself, that kind of stuff. And they're like, well, what do you stand for? I said, I'm a conservative Republican. There's no doubt about that. But I'm asking you what you stand for, and I want to represent your issues. I'm not going in there with a plan other than to say that your issues are now my issues. I'm going to represent them. Here's some things I'll never vote for. Here's some things I'll always vote for. Choice is yours.
The very first door that I knocked on in my campaign, I had a gentleman that instantly wasn't very happy with some of the things that Trump has done. Mm-hmm. And he went to right to the national stage. And I was like, okay, I could understand, he's frustrated on the national level. But I had to make that bridge that I'm here on the state level.
Right.
This is you and I. I'm here to talk to you about the things that impact us right here.
Yeah. And you can do something about it.
And I want to do something about it. Yeah, I want to hear about it. Mm-hmm. I want to know what your concerns are because I want to represent you. Like I didn't make my bid, to run for a House seat for myself. I was doing it, because I've been a voter all these years. And the more I tried to reach out and communicate with my representative, I kind of felt like the more and more of a gap there was there. And so I took that as, hey, this is a good reason to run. If my representative wasn't responding to me, mm-hmm. then when I run, I want to respond to people. I want to know what's going on. And so, obviously I didn't win my bid, but I do think that the gentleman that did, I have confidence he'll answer his emails and he'll answer the phone calls.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's a move in the right direction. Bridging that gap between legislators and the people of Montana, so we can find real solutions, be able to ease up on the tax dollars, keep our government in check, and be able to enjoy this great state. I mean, there's so much beauty here and so many things to do. So,
I'm teaching in the book of Judges right now at my church. And there's a lesson in there about, in the end, if the fig tree won't lead and the apple tree won't lead or whatever, then you're going to end up with the bramble bushes and weeds in charge because the good folks won't step up. And we've both done it in our own way and said, hey, I'm going to be part of the solution rather than let the bramble bushes and the weeds and stuff, take over governance in America, because that's not how you actually preserve and protect Montana for Montanans, regardless of where you come from. That's what it's going to take is folks like us. And that's why ultimately I'm excited from the statewide perspective on the legislature, both House and Senate, what I've seen as moving that ball towards the touchdown area, however you define that. And that's why I'm also very excited about how the goals that I've put in place as a county chair here in Lewis and Clark County was to truly find good conservative or candidates to run for office and stick to it. Now, maybe not as a candidate, but stick to it in a way that still makes a difference for the candidates or for the political environment. When I started doing this, 6 years ago, it is 180 degrees difference in this county. And that's not a one-person result. That is a team that came together who was willing to work together, who all have the same general philosophy towards things and are saying, you know what, this is worth doing. And I'm excited to see, regardless of results in November, where that will lead. Immediately or someday in the future. We just have to keep after it.
And that's what happened to me. Started attending Central Committee meetings and, started to become energized at participating in what's going on. And then, of course, I made my own bid for office. But even though I didn't, get past the finish line there, I want to stay involved in this. I want to keep helping candidates, and I want to keep helping bridge that gap between our legislators and the people. I think that's how we're really going to make a difference, is to, stay connected, stay involved, stay on top of the issues, and most importantly, make sure somebody can hear your voice,
right. In whatever form that takes.
And
I'll tell you right now, and anybody else in the committee who hears this will now have the answer. If they would like me to remain as the chair for this county GOP, I will do so come this fall. And if that continues on, I will call somebody and I'll put my name in the ring for being a regional chair for a multi-county region.
All right.
And continue the work of so many great patriots, because the person who's sitting in the regional chair spot, guess what he's doing now? He's a legislator in the House. I understand that takes a lot of time and energy, and he's overtasked. Okay. Here am I. Send me. I guess I will continue to step up wherever I need to, because if I don't do it, somebody else will. And God has given me the talents and skills and desire to do so until such time as he says you're done. Then I move on.
And he moves you, opens the next door for
right.
you.
Every time I try to go disappear, it never works. So,
well, I'd like you to stay in that chair position at least for another year, But of course, that's me being selfish.
It's okay to be selfish.
I've gotten used to, your leadership there at Central Committee. I've gotten used to it, and so, I'd like to see at least for another year anyway. But like you said, the Lord's in charge.
Oh, he is.
He'll open and close the doors for you.
I had a couple walk up to me at the convention and say, "What would it take to have you run for governor?" And I had lots of other answers to start off with. I said, in the end, if God tells me to do something like that, I will. And if he doesn't, I won't. And that's okay. Either answer is fine. I think of Gideon. And everybody remembers Gideon in the 300, and this hero warrior of the Jewish faith in history. And most people don't realize that he started out kind of a coward and a questioner and a doubter, and then eventually God grew him into that and provided him with the spine he needed. Now, granted, he reverted after it was over, but we all come from somewhere, and if something like that were to work, even remotely be possible, it would have to be an act of God. Because I can't buy a seat unless it's a chair from my desk.
I like that. Well, I think with that, we can just go ahead and wrap it up for today. But it was a pleasure having you in and, talking about the convention a little bit and these younger people we have coming up and trying to make that, bridge that gap between legislators and the voters. And hope to have you on again.
Absolutely.
Between now and the general.
The 3-minute commute, I can't complain about that. I live right up the street.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, good for you.
So absolutely, I'll come on anytime I'm asked. I'll join. I'll go on any media outlet anywhere. I've been on MSNBC. So I'm not.
Well, I know that's true. I've been at the gym before, killing myself at some cardio, and I look up and I'm like, oh, there's Darren on Fox News.
You're like, why are you there? Because if it ain't me, it'll be somebody.
Right? Well, Darren, it's good seeing you today.
You too.
Thanks for coming in, and we'll be talking soon.
James, my honor and pleasure, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.